Going for an interview can be very, very hard. The more you want the interview, the more you need the job, the harder it can be. So you prep, you practice, and you research the company. But sooner or later, you're going to be sat in a room with someone you don't know, and they're going to be firing questions at you. You're going to have to think fast and impress them. Today, I want to talk about some of the most challenging interview questions. We'll go through some real examples, and I want to try and explain to you not only great ways to answer those questions, but also why they might be asking that question in the first place. Just before we get into that, I wanted to ask you a quick favor. If you consider subscribing to this channel, we can bring you more content about careers, personal development, that sort of thing. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so I want you to remember that an interview is a two-way street. It's a chat with people that you want to be working with. It's not an interrogation. The typical questions that you're going to be asked are about how you would do something, how you react in a certain situation, and what you think about X or Y. Most questions, unless it's a technical interview, don't have a right and a wrong answer. It's mostly your opinion and how you would approach things. So try and relax. Try and remember that it's a two-way street and it's just a conversation with people about how you work and what you do in different situations. So here comes some difficult questions and the best way to approach them. First up, what are your weaknesses? This question can fill people with dread, and I've seen firsthand people flat out panic when they're asked this question in the room, but it doesn't need to be like that. Firstly, let's just quickly consider why they're asking you that question. An employer might just be asking you that question to see how quickly you can think on your feet, but in my experience, the question is actually a little bit more clever and a little bit deeper than that. We all know the things that we're good at. You'll love questions where you have to talk about your strengths and the skills that you have, and we're happy to discuss those things. But not everyone is particularly self-aware. Not everyone really knows the things that they need to improve on. What most people try and do when they're asked this question is they kind of give a strength and make it look like a weakness. Something like, I care too much about my work, or I work so hard it affects my work-life balance because I'm so passionate about my business. They're kind of trying to be too clever. I've even seen advice online and other people talk about the best way to answer this question is to try and kind of give something that's a strength. It isn't. The person interviewing you already knows that you're not good at every single thing. They know you're not perfect. What they want to know is, do you know that you're not perfect, and do you know what your areas for improvement are? We all have weaknesses and things we want to improve, but great people are so confident in their strengths that they're not afraid of having weaknesses or talking about them. This is how I would answer this question. That's a great question. There are a lot of things that I'm not good at. I'm not very good at X, and I know I really need to work on Y. I used to work with somebody who was really good at B, and I'd love to get better at that too. I'm really looking for a role where I can learn from great people and get better at everything I do, especially my weaknesses. By answering it this way, I'm directly addressing the question. I'm being honest. I'm showing that I'm self-aware, progressive, and human. Obviously, I can't fill out X, Y, and B for you, but just have a think about what the things are that you actually need to improve. Think back to maybe feedback you've received before, or things you'd like to just be better at, or, as in my example, something you've observed somebody else be really good at that you'd like to work on. Try and keep them loosely relevant to the job. If it's a sales job, there's not all that much point talking about, I'd really like to be able to change a car tire. Keep them professionally related goals and things you really would like to be good at and improve at over the next few years. One thing I would say is try and avoid saying you're bad at the exact thing that you're there to interview for. So if it's a sales job, don't say I can't speak to people, or I can't sell, or something quite like that. Be honest, but be smart. The next hard interview question that I want to talk about today is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The reason this question is hard is that people always seem to think that they have to say, oh, I'd like to be at this company in 5 years doing exactly this job. I guess the other reason that it's hard is that 5 years is a long way away. Who knows what's going to happen in 5 years' time? Companies that ask this question are doing so because they don't want people to leave too quickly. And it's a weird question to ask. I think if they ask you this, it should be a mini little red flag going off in your head of what is it that they're getting from this exactly. But if you are asked, you have to answer. Again, you'll be surprised to hear that my advice is honesty in this situation. Obviously, you did your research before the interview, and so you have a good idea of the recent history of the company. This is how I would answer this question. That's a hard question for me to answer. 5 years is a long time. I know that this company looked very different 5 years ago, and it will look unrecognizable in 5 years' time from how it looks today. What I can tell you is that I'm a progressive person. I need to feel like I'm being challenged, I'm learning and developing. I believe that if you stand still, then you're going backwards because everything around you is moving forwards. So to answer your question, in 5 years' time, I would like to think that I'm in an environment which challenges me, helps me progress, and does the sort of exciting work that I'm excited for in this role. An answer like this does a few things. Firstly, it pushes back on the question a little bit. It uses the time and opportunity to make some statements about my own ambitions, and it reaffirms that I'm excited for the role. The next hard question: how do you take feedback? Feedback is a hot topic in interviews because managers don't want to hire people that they think will be difficult to manage. But remember, again, this is a two-way street. They might not want somebody who's hard to manage, but you don't want to end up working for a useless manager either. The only answer you can really give is that you love feedback in all of its forms. You see goals, targets, and KPIs as a form of real-time feedback, but you also enjoy one-to-ones or appraisals and kind of qualitative feedback from a manager. All of it's an opportunity to grow. But here's the tip. You finish your answer with a question. What is this company's approach to feedback? What should I expect by way of feedback and management? In doing this, you throw it back to them. You show that, again, it's a two-way street. You're engaged. You're having a dialogue about this rather than them just firing questions at you. You sort of take a bit of control back as well, which I really like to do in interviews because I think it reminds the company that you're making an assessment of them at the same time as they're making an assessment of you. Next hard question. It's basically anything where they're asking you for an example. Lots of questions and possibly at lots of different parts of the interview. You might be asked to give an example to illustrate an answer or directly to answer a question. And some people find this really, really difficult. And it is hard. It's hard to pick out a specific example from your entire body of work that illustrates perfectly the point you're trying to make. But there's a little hack, and it's a two-step solution that you can work on in your prep. Step one is when you're doing your prep, you want to recall 3 or 4 stories that cover the main bases from your career, things that you can remember quite accurately, and you want to kind of rehearse them in your head. They need to cover 3 or 4 of these topics: overcoming a difficult challenge, an issue of some sort with a colleague or a coworker, a problem that you've helped to solve or solved yourself, a situation that didn't quite work out, but you learned from. Think about your experiences. If you have relevant recent work experiences that cover those things, then great. If you don't, if you're early in your career, if maybe you haven't had much by way of kind of full-time jobs yet, then think about other aspects of your life and tell the story in the context of, well, I'm early in my career, so professionally I haven't had this, but I did have this experience here or this experience there. Once you've got your 3 or 4 stories, it's time for step 2, and that is to apply the rule of 3. Once you finish your story, whatever experience example it is that you're offering, before you hand back, you want to say, from this experience, I learned A, B, and C. I learned these things. This is what it taught me. This is what I gained from this experience. And A, B, or C, one of those things wants to be the thing that they've asked you about in the first place, the thing that it is you're illustrating an example of. If you do this right, then you've got 4 stories, and you've got A, B, and C for each one. So between them, you have 12 possible kind of ways to go when they say, can we have an example of this? And all you really have to remember is what the question is they've asked you and your 3 or 4 stories that you did in your prep. That's about as prepared as you can be for the give me an example kind of question. And you should be fairly safe with those options in your back pocket. So there you have it, my take on 4 challenging interview questions or areas. As I said, just be yourself, relax and breathe. The prep that you've done beforehand is where most of the hard work goes in. Once you get in there, just try and have a conversation as a normal person. Good luck. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you on the next one.